I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, I always believed that marriage was about trust, about knowing your partner would stand by you no matter what. But that illusion shattered the night I found out my wife cheated on me, during our wedding dinner, no less. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and instead, I got a front row seat to the worst betrayal I could imagine. It all started with that damn phone. I was sitting at the head table trying to enjoy the toast and the laughter when I noticed her phone vibrating in her lap. She was sitting there, all smiles, with her hand resting near her thigh, but her eyes kept flickering to the screen. I'd seen her do it before, quick peeks, a distracted glance, so I didn't think much of it at first. Just typical nervousness or maybe a delayed message. But tonight something about her posture was different. Her fingers twitched, and she kept glancing down as if she was hiding something. I leaned closer, pretending to toast the best man, but really I was trying to see what was going on. The faint glow of her screen caught my eye. I saw the first few words, "Can't wait to see you tonight," before she quickly shut the screen. My stomach clenched tight. I should have said something right then, but I didn't. I thought maybe it was a friend, a work message, something innocent. I told myself I was overthinking. Later, I saw her slip her phone into her purse when she thought no one was watching. That was the first real red flag. She was nervous, more than she usually was at family gatherings. I noticed her hands trembling as she fumbled with her clutch, her eyes darting around like she was trying to hide something. I should have pressed her then, but I didn't. Instead, I kept telling myself I was paranoid. Fast forward a few hours and everyone was already starting to loosen up, glasses clinking, laughter spilling. She was sitting close to her best friend's brother, a guy I'd always thought was a little sketchy, but I never really paid much attention. Well, tonight I couldn't help but notice how close they were. She kept touching his arm, leaning in like they had some secret. I caught the way she looked at him, more than just friendly. It was like she was desperate for his attention and he was eating it up. Then, out of nowhere, her phone buzzed again. I saw her glance at it, her face ghostly pale for just a second. My heart started pounding harder. I was about to confront her right then, but she slipped her hand into her purse and made a quick move to hide the screen. Somehow, I knew I wouldn't get a clear look, but my instincts screamed I was onto something. Later that night, I stayed quiet, but I couldn't sleep. Images kept flashing, the way she looked at him, her nervousness, that hidden message. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. How could she do this during our wedding? How could she betray me in front of everyone in the most sacred moment of our lives? That night I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there, plain as day. Something was wrong, and I knew I'd have to face it sooner rather than later. I just didn't know what that would mean for us, if I could even forgive her, or if this was the end of everything I thought was real. I can tell you the worst part wasn't the cheating itself. It was the way she hid it, the way she looked at him like he was the only person who mattered. Trust shattered, heart broken. And now I was left with a question. What the hell do I do next? The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a stomach that felt like it had been twisted into knots. The wedding was over, but everything that had happened the night before kept replaying in my mind like a sick movie. I kept asking myself how I hadn't seen it earlier, how I'd been so blind to the signs. It hit me like a punch. She'd been lying right to my face all along, right under my nose. I tried to act normal during breakfast, but it was impossible. Her eyes kept darting around, avoiding mine, and her hands trembled when she reached for her coffee. I could see the guilt weighing her down, even if she tried to hide it. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I turned to her and said, "Who the hell have you been texting all night, huh? Don't play innocent with me." She froze, then forced a thin smile. "It's nothing, just some work stuff, nothing to worry about." I didn't buy it, not even for a second. I felt my palms sweat as I pushed further. "That message last night, the 'can't wait to see you tonight.' Who was that? Tell me right now." She hesitated, a split second that felt like an eternity, and then looked away. "It's none of your business," she spat back, voice trembling. That was when I knew I had to act. No more pretending I wasn't hurt, no more letting her lie her way out of it. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I decided I had enough evidence to confront her properly, but I also knew I had to be smart about this. I couldn't just storm in and accuse her without knowing exactly what I was up against. So I started digging. I went through her phone, her emails, everything I could find. The message she tried to hide was just the tip of the iceberg. There were dozens of texts, messages, even photos, proof that she'd been sneaking around with her best friend's brother for weeks. What really got me was the one she'd sent last week, a picture of her in bed with him. Her face was flushed, hair a mess, and she was smiling like it was the best night of her life. I looked at that photo and felt a rage that I'd never known. I wanted to smash something, to scream, to make her feel how betrayed I was feeling. But instead, I kept my composure. I needed a plan. When she finally saw the evidence I'd gathered, her face drained of all color. She stammered, trying to deny everything, but I cut her off. "Save it. I know what you've been doing, and I know exactly how long you've been lying to me." I was determined to make her understand this wasn't going to slide. I didn't want to see her cry or beg for forgiveness. I wanted her to feel the cold sting of betrayal. That's when I realized I had to come up with a revenge plan. Not just a petty one, but something calculated. Something that would leave her knowing I was done, that I'd taken back my dignity and then some. I didn't want her to walk away thinking she'd gotten away with this. She crossed a line, and I was about to make sure she paid for it. But before I did anything, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I had to think about how to hit her where it hurt, without crossing into destruction. I wanted her to feel the betrayal, not destroy everything we'd built. That meant detailed planning, leaks, maybe even a little public exposure, but always precise. I was furious, yes, but I also knew I had to be smart. I sat there for a long time, staring at her trembling hands. Her eyes filled with tears, but I was already immune to her pleas. I knew this was only the beginning. I had everything I needed now, the evidence, the resolve, and a plan. I didn't know how she was going to react when I finally executed it, but I knew one thing for sure. Her betrayal was about to come back on her tenfold. And if I had to do it, I'd do it clean, cold, and precise. No violence, just calculated revenge that would make her regret ever crossing me. I already felt the anticipation building inside me. This was going to be a long game, but I was ready. She was going to wish she never messed with me. That afternoon, I finally sat down and mapped out everything. I needed to be meticulous. This wasn't just about catching her. This was about sending a clear message. I had the evidence, but now I had to think about how to use it without giving her room to deny or spin her way out. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable, and most of all, to understand that her actions had consequences. First, I went through her phone again, making sure I cornered her with irrefutable proof. I found a few more messages, some deleted but recoverable, and I made copies. I was careful to keep everything in case I needed it later. Then I started planning my moves, what I'd say, how I'd say it, and what I'd do if she tried to deny or manipulate me. I wasn't planning to yell or throw things. No, I wanted her to see how cold and calculated I was becoming. I wanted to shock her into realizing she'd crossed a line she couldn't undo, so I rehearsed in my head. "You lied, you cheated, and you thought I wouldn't find out. That's the truth, and now you're going to face the consequences." While I was doing this, she kept hovering nearby, her eyes red-rimmed, her face pale. I could see her trying to hold it together, but underneath I knew she was breaking. She kept whispering, "Please, I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." I looked at her and said, "That's what they all say. Mistakes have consequences, and yours just cost you everything." Then I decided I had to make it public, at least in a way that she couldn't spin out of. I had a plan to leak some of the messages to her family and her closest friends, just enough to blow the lid off. Not full details, but enough to make her realize that her betrayal wasn't something she could hide. I wanted her to see the fallout coming, to feel the shame and regret. I spent the next couple of hours setting everything up. I created a folder with all the evidence, screenshots of the messages, the photo she'd sent him, and a timeline of their affair. I knew her phone was probably synced to her email, so I made sure to back up everything I needed. Once I had everything ready, I sat back and took a deep breath. I was about to execute the plan. But first, I wanted her to understand that I wasn't just doing this impulsively. No, I was about to show her that I'd been patient, that I'd given her enough chances, and now I was about to turn her world upside down, deliberately and carefully. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "You're going to regret this for the rest of your life. And trust me, I'll see to it that everyone else does too." She looked at me, eyes pleading, but I saw the fear behind her tears. I knew she thought she could somehow smooth this over, maybe lie her way out of it. But I had no intention of letting her. The game was on, and I was ready to play it to the very end. The next step was clear. I would send the evidence to her closest circle, family, friends, anyone who mattered, and then I'd confront her directly with everything in my possession. I wanted her to feel cornered, exposed, and utterly powerless. That's when I knew she'd realize the extent of her betrayal, and I wasn't going to stop until she understood that her actions had consequences. As I finished setting everything in motion, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was as if I'd been waiting for this moment my whole life. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. I'd come too far to turn back now. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. My plan was simple: make her see the damage she had done and force her to reckon with it. No more hiding, no more lies, just the truth, raw and brutal, and I knew this was only the beginning. Once I had everything prepared, I took a deep breath and hit send. The evidence went out to her closest friends and family, along with a carefully worded message I crafted myself. I made sure it was straightforward, no accusations, just the facts. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable, and knowing that her secrets were out of her control now. That moment, sitting there watching the notifications pop up, was oddly satisfying. She immediately sensed something was happening. She came into the room, eyes wide with panic, and demanded to know what I'd done. Her voice trembled as she asked, "What did you send? What's going on?" I looked at her calmly and said, "You're about to find out, and I hope you're ready for the consequences." Her face twisted into a mixture of fear and anger. "You're ruining everything," she spat. "This isn't fair." But I knew better. It was her own actions that brought us here, and I was just making sure she couldn't hide anymore. I watched her crumble a little as the messages started to land, her phone ringing off the hook, texts pouring in from her family and friends. The silence stretched between us, thick with what was coming. I didn't say much. Instead, I let the chaos do the work. I wanted her to see how quickly her world was falling apart. It was a slow, deliberate process, and I was patient. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept my tone cold. "This is what betrayal looks like. You don't get to pretend you're innocent anymore." Her eyes flickered with tears and she lunged toward me, voice cracking. "Please just stop. I didn't mean for it to get out of control. I was weak. I messed up. Just don't do this." I grabbed her arm firmly but not aggressively. "You made your choices. Now you get to face the fallout." That's when she finally broke down completely, sobbing and begging me to forgive her, to forget everything. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I knew that once her secrets were out, there was no going back. I just looked at her, feeling a strange mix of rage and relief. I'd finally turned the tables and she was drowning in her lies. The fallout was immediate. Her phone kept ringing nonstop. Her face was blotchy and red, eyes swollen from crying. I could see her trying to come up with excuses, trying to spin her way out, but it was too late. The damage was done. Her world was crumbling and I had front row seats. I decided to confront her directly, to give her a final chance to explain herself. I told her, "You lied, you cheated, and now everyone knows. What do you have to say for yourself?" She looked at me, her lip trembling, and whispered, "I was stupid. I didn't think it would go this far." Her voice was barely recognizable. That's when I realized she'd lost control and I had to decide what to do next. I told her I needed some space, that I was going to leave for a bit. I packed a bag, took the keys, and left her there helpless. I knew I wasn't done yet. I had a lot more planned, but I wanted her to sit with what she'd done, to feel the weight of her betrayal pressing down on her. That was just the beginning. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of calm. The chaos she'd unleashed was only the start of my revenge. I knew I'd make her regret every single lie and betrayal. She thought she could get away with it. Not anymore. I'd taken control of this mess and I was going to make sure she paid. That night, I sat in my car, fingers tapping the steering wheel. I knew she'd be devastated, maybe even regret what she'd done, but I also knew I couldn't trust her anymore. The trust was shattered beyond repair. Her actions had changed everything between us, and I knew I'd have to act carefully if I wanted to come out of this with some dignity intact. The plan was set. The fallout had begun, and I was just getting started. The following days were a blur of phone calls, messages, and a strange, hollow feeling in my chest. My mind kept circling around her betrayal, replaying every detail, every lie she'd told, every moment she'd spent with him. I stayed busy, but honestly I couldn't shake the feeling of being hollowed out, like I'd been hollowed by her actions. I spent hours staring at the messages I'd leaked, watching her world unravel. Her family was furious, her friends stunned, many of them clearly taking my side. The texts and calls came in thick and fast, some swearing at her, some offering support, others just plain shocked. I could hear her crying on the phone, begging for forgiveness, but I didn't care. She made her choice. Now she had to face the consequences. One thing I made sure of, she'd be completely cut off from the people she thought loved her. I blocked her on all social media, changed my number, and kept my distance. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be isolated, to see what betrayal really felt like when it wasn't just words but a full-on social wrecking ball. Meanwhile, I kept planning my next move. I wasn't interested in just walking away quietly. No, I wanted to make sure she remembered every detail of what she'd done, that she'd understand how deeply her betrayal cut. I needed her to realize she had lost control of her life, and I was the one holding the reins now. I started by sending her a simple message. You lost me and you lost yourself. Think about that. It was enough to make her panic, and I could see her trying to reach out, but I ignored her. I wanted her to sit in her guilt, to feel the cold weight of what she'd done. Then I devised my final move. I was going to give her a taste of her own medicine, without crossing the line into outright destruction. I wanted her to see how it felt to be betrayed, to be humiliated, and to be utterly powerless in her own mess. My plan was set and it was about to unfold. One evening I went to her favorite cafe, the one we used to visit together, and I left a small, unmarked envelope on her table. Inside was the photo of her in bed with him, along with a note. You thought you could hide forever. Now everyone knows the truth. I watched from a distance as she saw it, her face draining of color. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, and her eyes flicked around wildly. She looked up, saw me across the street, and her expression turned to pure panic. She realized I was the one behind it. She had no way out now. The proof was out there, and everyone knew. I wanted her to feel exposed, vulnerable, exactly how she'd made me feel. Days later, she reached out to me, begging for a chance to talk. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I met her in a quiet park where I could see her trembling like a leaf. She looked desperate, her eyes swollen from crying. She apologized, pleaded, even promised she'd do anything to fix this. I looked at her coldly. You don't get to fix this, I said. You chose to betray me, and now you get to face the fallout. I don't want to hear your apologies. What I want is for you to understand the full weight of what you've done. I paused. You've lost everything that mattered. You want a second chance. It's not happening. All I want now is for you to realize how much damage you caused. Her face crumpled and she broke down crying again. I felt nothing but a strange, distant satisfaction. She'd pushed me to my limit, and I was making sure she'd never forget it. I handed her a folder with the evidence of her affair, just so she'd never be able to deny it again. That was it. I turned and walked away, leaving her there, sobbing on the park bench. I knew she'd be haunted by what she'd done, every message, every photo, every tear. And I also knew I was done. I'd taken back my dignity, and I'd made her pay for hers. Looking back, I realized what I learned from all this. Betrayal cuts deep, but so does a well-planned revenge. I didn't need to destroy her completely. I just needed to make sure she knew what she'd lost. Trust can be broken in an instant, but repair. Sometimes it's better to walk away and leave the wreckage behind. That's what I did, and I've never felt more free. That night I went home and finally sat alone in the quiet. The house felt colder than usual, the silence heavy with the weight of everything that had just happened. I looked around at the empty spaces where her things used to be, clothes, jewelry, little mementos, and for a moment I felt a strange sense of relief, like I'd finally shed the weight that had been dragging me down for months. I took the keys she'd left behind and placed them on the table, next to the folder of evidence I'd carefully kept. I knew she'd come back, maybe try to reach out again, but I had made my decision. No more games, no more lies. I wanted to be done with her completely. I picked up the documents, held them in my hands, and felt the cold satisfaction of closure. With deliberate calm, I walked to the filing cabinet and placed everything inside. I put the keys in. An envelope sealed it and wrote for her eyes only. I took a deep breath, then went to the front door and locked it. No more looking back. No more second guessing. That chapter was closed for good. I think back to that night, to the betrayal and all the chaos, and I realize something important. Sometimes the only way to heal is to cut out the poison completely. You can't save someone who refuses to see their own faults. You can't rebuild trust where it's been shattered. The only option is to walk away, pick yourself up, and start over. So I did. I handed her the keys, sealed her fate, and stepped outside. As I watched her shadow fade into the darkness, I felt a strange peace settle over me. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without the heaviness of betrayal hanging over my chest. I knew I'd be okay, better than okay, actually. What I learned from all this is simple. You don't have to accept betrayal. You don't have to stay in the wreckage. Revenge isn't about destroying, it's about reclaiming your power, about choosing yourself over the pain. And in the end, that's what saved me. I walked away knowing I was stronger, wiser, and finally free.